Okay, thank you all. We're going to continue with our second session. We're changing the format a bit. We asked all the members of the panel to sit up here, so this will facilitate the discussion afterwards. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our next presenter, Hans-Dieter Bienert from the DAFG. He's going to be talking about types of research projects funded in the humanities, so we'll get to more specific instances of the kinds of research projects that that the funding agencies feel are particularly successful. Hans-Dieter Bienert is the program director for studies of ancient cultures and the deputy director of the Division of Humanities and Social Sciences, so we see humanities and social sciences together, at the DAFG in Germany. He received his PhD degree at Tübingen University and has served as the director of the German Protestant Institute of Archaeology in Amman until 2001. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for your introduction, and also thank you very much for welcoming me here for this very inspiring and quite interesting meeting and roundtable discussion here. I'll try to give you a quick insight into DFG and what DFG is all about and doing for the humanities. So DFG serves all branches of science and humanities. We have had this before. Supports education and advantage of young scientific researchers. So these are some of the main topics, yeah? Serving basic research in all fields and helping scholars also to get into science and humanities with the support of DFG. Promotes equality between men and women, advises parliament and public authorities on scientific matters, and another becoming more important issue is foster relations between research and the private sector, but more specifically between scientists and academics at home and abroad. We have heard about DFG's structure. Members of DFG include German universities, non-university research institutions, German academies of science and humanities, and scientific associations. DFG is an association under private law. However, DFG is funded by the taxpayer, so 67% of our money is coming from the federal government, 33% about from the German states, and bits of money from private sources. In 2014, we had a total budget of approximately 2.8 billion euros. We have 4 major branches. It's the humanities and sciences, natural science, life science, engineering science. And here on this slide, you see the approximate amount of money, percentage of money for 2010 to 2014 going into these fields. You see humanities starts with 14%, now 2014 by about 15%. So it keeps quite a strong balance. How is DFG structured? Also, we have heard about it previously. I just want to point out to some key elements within these structures. It's the General Assembly, which is electing the Senate and the Executive Committee, and also the President of DFG. However, a very important part within DFG structures are the so-called review boards. They are the ones who finally look at applications or take part in panel review and make an advice to the Joint Committee. Now the Joint Committee is a committee which has members from the Senate, so the elected members from the academic community, and they are joined by members of the state, of the funders who give the money. However, the majority is with the scholars. So everything is, if they want, within the range, within the hands of the scholars. The review board, there are elections every 4 years. So every 4 years, the communities elect members from their field to be members in the review board, to stay for another 4 years. We have had just an election finishing today, an online election. All in all, we have 48 review boards for all fields. Within humanities and social sciences, we have 13. Now, within these 13 boards, we have ancient studies, theology, law, sociology, psychology. Within these review boards, we have different fields, major fields represented, like in ancient studies, prehistory, classics, ancient history, Middle Eastern studies, Middle Eastern archaeology. And that's quite important for them also to learn, their main duty is not to review again an application coming, but to look at a number of applications they are presented with and to see which are the ones they would favor, looking at written reviews we have got to each of these applications. I will outline this a little bit later on. So their main task is not to evaluate again a single proposal, but to choose out of the proposals based on written reviews, which are the ones we would put forward for the joint committee to be funded. Sorry, that's the wrong way. Yeah. Now, by about the year 2000, we started an initiative, funding initiative for the humanities, which in fact lasted from 2002 to 2007. Reason for the initiative was that research communities in the humanities complained about a kind of inadequate funding policy of DFG and other funders. So they said the programs really do not meet our specific needs in humanities, and a significant decline of funding rates was, in their opinion, quite visible. Now, not getting into a debate whether it's correct or not, we took the measure that we said, okay, we'll take up this challenge coming from the humanities, but won't respond the next day, but we'll invite scholars from that field to discuss in colloquias, to get expert meetings, whether these kind of complaints are true or how we could respond. It took a couple of years, a number of colloquia and meetings, poll assesses were made, and in the end, we said, some of your complaints might be right, and we adjusted our programs and our procedures. So we introduced some new funding schemes. First, the humanities complained and said, well, what we need is time. Often we haven't got time. So you see some of the institutions, they have got a professor doing research, doing education, doing administration, having no assistant, no secretary, and often not an equal partner to talk to, but I need time to do my research. Yeah? I don't need money for an instrument. I don't need money for lots of people doing different things for me, but I need money just to sit, and I need time just to sit. So we introduced that he can or she can apply for costs for replacement. So to get out of his university duties for a couple of months, for up to 1 year, and we pay for the replacement doing his duties at the university. Second, humanities centers for advanced studies. That's a new kind of funding scheme for helping excellent scholars who have or could describe an idea they want to do research on, but it can't be funded in a kind of program step by step, saying, well, I want to do in month 1 this, in year 1 this, in year 2 this. But I have an idea, I want to work on it, and for this I need a kind of specific environment to invite scholars from abroad, to have some postdocs working with me, to have free time. So this we introduced as kind of humanities centers for advanced studies. I can elaborate a bit later on if there's an interest. And then for the young scholars, they said, well, what we also need, and what doesn't cost much, we need to network, yeah, to get and meet people, to exchange ideas, maybe to build up new kind of networks, to think of what we could do together. So we introduced the program for scientific networks. And we adjusted our program for long-term projects. Often also in humanities, if you do work on in literature, yeah, on the works of Kant or Böll or whatsoever, if you go for a large excavation, you often can't do it within a time frame of 3 or 4 or 5 years, out of 2 reasons probably. Because you haven't got the staff working with you to do all of it in that short period. Secondly, sometimes also for sociology, for example, if you go for a longitudinal study, it's not enough to look at a 3 years or 2 years or 4 years interval. You often need 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So we said we have programs in our program in which we offer funding for up to 12 years. But we have also special criteria then for the evaluation. So these 4 elements, I think, responded to that specific kind of need addressed by the community of the humanities. In the year 2007, so the year when we finished our study, there was also the year of humanities announced by the government, and different programs also offered by the government to help to advance research in the humanities, and most of them also referred to what the FG has done in its research, in its funding initiative. Coming now to some of the programs, I just want to focus on programs which are, I think, specifically of interest for the humanities also. Funding opportunities are targeted towards researchers and just who is eligible for funding. At the German research institutions we have, or German research institutions who have completed their scientific training. So everyone at a university or at a non-university but academic institution can apply for funding to DFG. Who live and work in Germany or go abroad, so someone from Israel, someone from the States, from England, who has an affiliation and who stays in Germany can apply for the German research, can apply to the German Research Foundation. A German who lives in the States or in Britain or in France can't. So he will have to apply to a particular institution in that country. And of all ages and all nations. What does DFG fund? DFG is funding proposals for individual projects and for coordinated research projects. Scientific context and research infrastructure I'm not going to focus on now, but I could outline later on if there's an interest in. The individual grants program encompasses research grants with publication funds, research fellowships, temporary positions for principal investigators, and then a kind of excellence program are the Bienert and the Heisenberg program, which are open for all fields. Now, the research grants are, I think, the most frequently applied funding scheme at DFG. The purpose is to carry out a thematically defined research project within a specific time frame. So you can come up with an idea and say, I need funding for research to work on that idea for up to 6 years' time. And I may need whatever, from small sum to a large sum. Eligibility for that kind of project, researchers from all disciplines at German research institutions who have completed their scientific training. In most cases, it's that they have achieved their doctorate and that they have got a position at an academic institution. So within that research grant, we won't fund their salary. So they have to have a position and have to have a kind of infrastructure to conduct that project. It means we won't fund telephone costs, we won't fund paper or room whatsoever. The duration for this project is normally up to 6 years, evaluation every 3 years. Now, I think, I'm not sure who addressed it this morning, the that young scholars, postdocs, are often funded through supervisors, so to continue their research. To address this problem, as we call it, until the year 2000, we also had often people who have finished their PhD, who were in a postdoc development, said, I want to do this and this, but I need money to live, yeah? So they went to a professor at university, and he often then applied at DFG to conduct the project, but in fact the project was designed and run then by that postdoc scholar. But responsible for DFG, and the project was headed, was the name of the professor. So we said that should be changed, and we changed, and we introduced a program called Temporary Position for Principal Investigators. We call it the eigene Stelle. So to help a postdoc to apply for money to fund his own position at a university. What he needs for is an agreement with a scientific organization, a university, or even a non-university but academic institution, saying, I'm going to employ that person, that guy, that girl, for up to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, if funded is provided, and then this person will be a member of that institution and can carry out its research, his or her research under his and her name at this chosen environment. And within humanities, it's a program which is highly asked for. It also demonstrates another problem a funding organization can't really tackle properly, but it points to the fact that at universities, often positions for postdocs are lacking or are decreasing, yeah? There's a professor having his position, but there is often no postdoc, no second level at the university. And from the number of applications we receive for the temporary position, we see that DFG becomes somehow a kind of employment market for the university for that particular type of people at that time in their career. Then we have research fellowships. These are fellowships normally for up to 2 years. If scholars from Germany, also normally postdocs, want to go to abroad to do some kind of research, they can apply for a scholarship. So if you want to come to Israel, to Jordan, to the States, whatsoever, they say, I want to go to that institution to do research, they can apply for a scholarship and receive it for up to 2 years. And there is normally no way of a renewal proposal for that kind of fellowship. Now, how does DFG provide funding, or what does DFG provide funding for? It's staff funding. So in many projects, you need additional staff to conduct a certain project, a postdoc, a doctorate student, or even students. Funding for direct project costs or consumables. So you need to analyze fundings you made. You need to have a specific instrumentation. If you go to the jungle, you may need a specific telephone to get in contact. So these are specific needs to conduct this specific project. This is something also you can apply for. Travel allowance, larger instrumentation, and then funding for items like publications, workshop, or, which is newly introduced also, for PR activities. Of course, we're also aware that humanities probably need to address a broader public audience with its research results. And for this, you may need to, also in countries maybe you go to, you need to produce a pamphlet, you like to design a small exhibition or whatsoever. So that's kind of money you can apply for with PR activities. Just here an overview now. What individual grant programs does the DFG offer at different stages of the academic career? You see it for the studies. We have already people as students who can join DFG projects on that level, doctorate, postdoctoral, level, and then we have a kind of achievement for eligibility for the future. This is for the postdocs, the temporary position in a DFG project, research fellowships, and then we have also programs who help you after, in fact, a kind of postdoc position to stay in academia, but not having yet a real proper position for life. Then we have collaborative research programs, research units. The purpose is here to provide researchers with the opportunity to work jointly on a particular research task in order to achieve results that go beyond what can be achieved through individual research. So getting 3-4 excellent people together to help them to work on a joint project. And the duration is of up to 6 years. We have got priority programs, which helps a larger community to address what we call an emerging field or a challenge, if you want to use that term, to work on. And they design a kind of frame for that work. If the DFG Senate then approves it in a competitive evaluation, then DFG announces that program, and all scholars who want to work on that topic can apply for funding, and it will be reviewed in a 3 years term, and the program can be funded for 6 years. We got for the young scholars, as we said also as I said in the beginning, DFG is also addressing education, academic education, research training groups within Germany at German universities. It's a structured PhD program. It's not a graduate school. It focuses on a specific research topic, and it can be also run as a kind of international research training group. The funding here you see that, for example, SSH, the Humanities and Social Sciences, are quite successful as they consume 31% of the whole budget here. We got collaborative research centers, which are large bodies at universities who also work on a kind of broad topic and incorporate different interdisciplinary fields at the university, and they can be funded of up to 12 years. Here you see the budget, 10% of the humanities. Life sciences here are taking the majority of the budget, but it's also quite understandable if you see the details of the program and the size and scale of research being conducted. Now, DFG reviews evaluate process is based on the scientific merit. That's the main thing, scientific merit. The applications qualification, goals and work program, working environment, and the proposed use of funding. So there has to be a kind of understandable equilibrium of what you want to do and what you want to have. And to sum up here, I'm sorry for taking out so much time, you see how a proposal now is being evaluated. It comes to DFG from the top, you have to look at. We choose reviewers for that proposal. It depends on the amount of money you ask for 1, 2, 3 reviewers. It depends on the type of subject you work on. If it is an interdisciplinary subject, then we also may ask people from different fields to look at the proposal. When we have got all the reviews back, sometimes we ask for further inquiries, the applicant, but then it goes with an assessment from us to the review board, and at a certain interval, normally 3 times a year, the review board looks at a number 30, 40, 50, 60 applications, and is going to choose out of that applications, according to the amount of money available, the ones they propose for funding to the joint committee, and the joint committee is then finally deciding, and the notification is given to the applicant. Yes, I hope I stayed in time. I couldn't elaborate really properly in all of the different fields, but it's maybe a case for the discussion.
So we'd like to open up the panel for discussion. First from the panelists, if anybody would like to either ask any questions or address any of the issues discussed by Dr. Leer.
Yes, I would like to ask one question. What you showed was that the budget taken by social sciences and humanities overall is about 15% of DFG's budget, but you also showed for the several programs, and I noticed that for the larger programs, the percentage for SSH research is smaller, and I think that's a tendency that we see in most of our councils, that humanities and social sciences are effective in getting funds, but mostly in the smaller schemes.
I would say so. You see, as I've just showed you the slide for the training groups, yeah, it's 31%, the graduate schools,
yeah,
the graduate program, so it's more than in any other field. There's a difference with the collaborative research centers, but the collaborative research centers, if you look at the success rate of the applications by humanities, it's not below any other field. However, these collaborative research centers are normally interdisciplinary research centers, often also taking humanities and parts of the hard sciences, or some of the humanities are within some of the hard sciences collaborative research centers. So it's taking out the programs and giving a kind of number. Priority programs, which in our opinion would be a kind of really good program of funding humanity research, because it allows to address a broad emerging field and allow participation all over Germany from universities and non-academic institutions. So from many different fields people could participate. However, in the past years we have had less and less applications from humanities coming up. Only this year we have again 8 applications. The majority of applications came from the engineering sciences. This might be true that they might be on a broader scale better organized, and to get a sufficient number of people together to write an idea which is not focusing on Egyptology or on classics or on a specific field in prehistory might be a bit more difficult, because what I often say, you have to have 6, 7, 8 people together to write that idea, and you have 10 characters. This might be a bit different in the organization in life science or in engineering or in the hard science. But we work on the response mode, yeah? So there is no previous idea of we give that kind of money to science and that kind of money for humanities. It's according to quality assessment what it ends up finally.
So I had a follow-up to that, and just with respect to the experience in humanities, particularly in Canada, and in part it follows a bit of the trend that you're describing. So in the case where humanists or even social scientists are applying for cross-agency programs, and we have some, we have a program called Networks of Centers of Excellence, and grants can run up to $15 million over a number of years. And those are what we call tri-agency or cross-agency programs. So the rates of success in social sciences and humanities are very low. And I think structurally there's a problem there.
Such as very low means at
5 or 10%.
Is there a way to rectify that situation?
Well, I think it's systemic. I think it's in the program design. And I think that our researchers are coming into these projects, which are very attractive because they're going to cure cancer or find a way to the moon or turn the atom into a source of energy that is safe and friendly. And then the social science and humanities component becomes the GELS piece. The GELS ghetto, so people get pulled in at the margins and they get funded. But in terms of project projects that are led by social scientists or humanists, they're very rare and they don't tend to succeed. Now, so that's the counterfoil to something that happens within our agency, because we have about an 80-20 split on large-scale versus small-scale projects just for social sciences and humanities, and we call them partnership grant or partnership development grants, and they're about 2.5 million Canadian dollars over 5 to 7 years, the bigger ones. Now there, what's interesting, obviously we have applicants and we have successful applicants and we spend the money, but there the humanities would constitute a proportion of success that's equal to their success across the program. The analyses that we've done, even for smaller grants, show that about 30% of successful grants are from the humanities, compared to 70% or so from social sciences. So even in the small grants that's true, but in the largest grants it's also true. And what are they doing? You know, what do you do in a humanities grant for $2.5 million? Well, if you're doing anything in the digital realm, if you require access to high performance computing, if you need to get access to sophisticated or create sophisticated databases. But even more than that, one project that we funded recently was on the Spanish Baroque. $2.5 million contribution for the team, again, to pay for networking, linking to people in Germany and Spain and Latin America. They're all over Peru and rural Bolivia looking for Baroque orchestras that are still apparently functioning after the, even in the 21st century. So this was a great example. I have others, where people are encouraged, they're able to apply for funds, they're able to imagine projects, that make good use of these funds. It works, but we typically only when we offer those in the context of our funding in SSH, it's okay. When we send them out into the world, they don't do so well by comparison.
Go ahead, Francois.
I have just a question to Hans-Dieter. You told us that social sciences and humanities get 15% of the budget. Is this percentage determined a priori, or is it proportional to the number of applications, to the budget of the amount? For example, at Bienert, we have a strict correspondence between the distribution of the budget and the number of applications. For example, last year I succeeded in raising the number of proposals by more than 50%, just by posing the topics, etc. I'm sure that it will give us 50% of budget more. Well, even if the total amount will be will be stable. So is this 15% determined a priori? What is exactly the determinants of this figure?
Yes. Well, it's the same with us. Yeah, it's not a figure set at the beginning of the year and saying, you get this, you get this, you get this. Okay. It has to be a base, and the base is the number, not the number of applications, but the sum of money applied for in the past year or 2 years in relation to what we have been able to allocate. So, for example,
so there is an historical history.
Yes. So, if for example, if you have had 50% of the money allocated for research projects, that's a very high level. Yeah. And now, in relation to what is the pressure coming, if there's only 5 million standing, it would mean, well, there's too much money in the system, because the FG is fostering excellency and not research, in the broad scale. Then it could shift to another field, more into life science, but it could also shift into engineering. If the same would be true in life science, it would shift into humanities. But in the past years, we have seen it has been quite stable. And for the next, and we have had, for example, in 2011 to 2013, approximately 1.1 billion euros for humanities and social sciences. It was an increase of 16% in comparison to the years 2008 to 2010. Yeah? But it was hard work also, because we give according to the need, yeah, to the pressure. This sometimes humanities want change. They say, well, we are different because we only put in an application when we are really sure it's perfect. I said, don't go pregnant for 12 months, yeah, 9 months are, your normal pregnancy. Come and leave it and put it for the comparison.
Can I ask you something about your graduate programs? Are those something that are set on a temporary basis? So you set up something like a graduate school. You said it's not a graduate school, so how do you...
Well, it's a specific program universities can apply for. It's not an individual, yeah? But within universities, a couple of professors can come together and say, we want to have a kind of graduate program on a specific broader field.
So it's limited in time?
Yes,
so
yes.
The graduate program essentially ceases to exist
after
the funding.
It's for 9 years, and it has interval of re-evaluation after 4.5 years. So, for example, we want to work on ancient cities around the Mediterranean. Yeah, we have to specify that scholarly context on the one hand, but for this you also have to provide a clear program of what you offer for the graduate students. So a graduate program also has to be an important part within. So research is not the main topic, the main focus, but the educational part of it.
But it essentially then funds the graduate students for the duration of...
Yes, for the duration of their PhD. So normally for up to 3 years.
I understand. So, but then these graduate programs cease to exist after
yes.
a number of years of funding, and then
yes.
you go...
Yes.
I wanted to ask about rationale.
Well, just 1 second, wait for the... You're being recorded.
I wanted to ask about the rationale behind the postdoc position and temporary positions, and also the program that Malka mentioned, that that the focus is really the professor researcher. And I think, maybe 2 problems with this approach. And when I'm visiting Germany, I see my field is philosophy, many philosophers who have temporary positions. And one problem with this is there are today many temporary positions, but very few permanent positions. So the young people are always anxious about their future, and maybe in this way also many of them don't get positions, so maybe it's better, to let them go and find other jobs earlier. And the other one, and more interesting problem, is that it's a very different philosophy from what I know from the United States and from Israel, where doctoral students, postdoctoral students, or even assistant professors, they basically can do what they want to do in terms of research. I mean, we encourage their imagination, their creativity, etc. And here, with these positions, I see that many of those people, they go and take part in, let's say, a group on causation. Many of them are not really very interested in this topic, but this is where the money is, because the researcher, the professor, the research group is on causation. They got a position within this research group.
It's an example of causation.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so I wanted to hear what you think, and what is really the philosophy behind this approach that I see in many of your programs.
Well, you are correct. There's a real bottleneck between people having finished the academic education with a PhD, have probably had a postdoc period of 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then of having the chance to get into a permanent position. Now for us, we say it's important to help people who have decided to stay in academia, at least for a couple of years, to do research, to further qualify themselves, maybe not only in the field they have gained their, they have received their PhD in, but to broaden also their academic perspective, and then to be better prepared when a position comes up. This has been in the past only been possible by having, as I've said, a professor applying for this kind of research and employing you as on a temporary position within that kind of project. You're right, we will never be able as research funding organization to offer permanent positions. Yeah. On the other hand, it's within the responsibility of the university professors also to openly discuss with their students and their postdocs also about the academic career. Having the bottleneck by research funders strictly administrated and saying only one or two will come up who will have the chance for a permanent position, I think you can't do it at that stage even. Yeah? So it's the freedom of everybody to finally decide what they want to go to do. You're correct. Some people applied for that kind of funding. They may be successful with another project, and then they are at the age of 50 or 48. There is no permanent position. There is no further other funding possibility. And then they are also too old to get a start in another profession. That's correct.
What happens to them?
Good question.
I have an answer.
Why don't you research that?
Yes, I have an answer to this very point.
Yeah.
We have observed that there is now a sort of brain drain from Germany to France, because all these wonderful scholars, especially in linguistics, in archaeology, who cannot get permanent positions in Germany, can get it in France. And so we have now a significant, yes, we have a significant number of professors, permanent professors in French university, in Dijon, in Strasbourg, in Besançon, in all these cities close to Germany. So professors of archaeology or linguistics, other topics too, philosophy too, who are suffering from this extremely conservative system you have in Germany, not very different from what was going on during Kant times, and Kant succeeded in becoming a permanent researcher very late in life. He had to write the critics of pure reason in order to have there is something structural here. And so we are benefiting from this. Why I'm saying this? Because we have a direct consequence of this system in the French-German program we have between INR and DFG, because a significant part of the representatives of France in the French-German program are Germans with positions in France. So it's not, of course, the same scale as a brain drain from France or Italy to UK, which is a huge brain drain. You can observe it in ERC. Half of the Italian candidates, applicants in ERC, half of the Italian applicants are supported by British universities. But it begins and so I try to have the figures, but in fact, the question we should raise in depth is it to the DFG or to a funding agency to compensate for these difficulties, or, and the question was very well posed, or is it to the German university to reform itself? We have also a lot of problems in the French university.
That's what I have said in the beginning, yeah. We have a high percentage of these temporary principal investigator applications which reflect the situation at universities. However, we can't interfere into the universities and tell them, look, you have to find now permanent positions. We can talk about the problem, can make people aware of the problem, but it's something not for a funding agency to interfere in that kind of university policies.
Just a couple of observations from the UK. it is true that the academic job market is increasingly international. That's just true everywhere. Second, I completely agree. I mean, the role of a research funding agency cannot be to secure permanent employment. You know, there just has to be a division of responsibilities. However, on the brighter side, in the UK, your challenge was, have you not done research on this? In the UK, we have done research on what happens to research council-funded people. Only a relatively small percentage of whom will go into the academic world, around 20%. The rest of them actually will do rather well in life. That's what the data is. That actually, if you do a PhD, it's not just the specialist skills and knowledge you've acquired in doing that, but the transferable skills and knowledge you've acquired, which is of value to employers. And it may be of interest for you.
At what stage do you go out into the job market?
Well, I was coming to
40 or 50, right?
It may be of interest to you to know that actually the earnings power of humanities graduates in the UK is better than those in the biosciences, which is very interesting. Now, the issue about at what point people make a decision must be a decision for individuals, but there is a serious concern in the UK, particularly in the natural sciences, about people serially holding short-term posts to the point where actually they end up in that mid-career crisis. And so there is some talk in the UK about limiting the number of such posts that people can have to 3. Okay, after that you simply can't apply for another one. And you're forced out to try and get a different kind of career.
Questions from
Hear me? Yeah, it's okay? Yeah. Hi, my name is Ruth Ginio. I'm from Ben Gurion University, from history. I was very interested by what you said about this idea of the lack of time, because following this comment before of the person who said about humanities do not need money, I think that the problem is not that we don't need money, but we need money for kind of strange things, maybe, or kind of different things than other, perhaps, sciences. And this question of time is crucial, because, I mean, we need to do research, but we have to do all these other administrative and teaching and all the other things, and you really don't get, you need time to think, even, just to be relaxed, not think to other things, to get to your research every day. And this is something that costs money, because you have to recompense the university for it. So one question is, I was wondering how exactly does it work? Because in Israel we had something like that with the Advanced Studies Center, but now I understand there's a problem about recompense of universities. So my university, for example, does not allow it anymore. You have to do it instead of your sabbatical. You can't do it on your, like, you know, if you don't have sabbatical. And the other question is there any other kind of thought in Germany about specific needs, not only of humanities, but also within humanities? Because, for example, between different disciplines, different subjects in humanities, you have different needs. For example, historians of other countries have to travel much more for archives, and for my own area, which is African history, you have all sorts of needs, very, very special and bizarre needs that you need in Africa that are really not relevant to any other people who work in France or in Italy. So I was wondering if there is any kind of thought about how to just open the possibilities of funding so that everyone can get what he really needs, he or she needs.
Well, with an ordinary research grant, yeah, you can apply for free time of up to 12 months. So having funding to pay for a replacement, fulfilling your university duties at your specific place. So you can say, I'm getting out of teaching, I'm getting out of administration for up to 12 months, and we will pay for someone who will do the job. In some other programs, as I have said, the Centers for Advanced Studies in the Humanities, which can last for up to 8 years, you can apply for up to 50% in each year of having free time. So the replacement can be paid for up to 8 years 50%. 50% why? Because we said we also don't want to have an excellent scholar, and they have to be excellent scholars to get that kind of funding, to take him out from university, yeah, from exchange with other colleagues, with students, for 8 years on total. That's why we said we limit it to 50%. The other question, if you are a historian, you work in Africa or you work in the middle of Germany, you always have with a research grant to define a specific project, yeah, a limited, timely limited project. And you have to outline what you want to do in each stage of that project, and then you have to say, I need to go to Africa 10 times a year, so your costs for travel will of course be far more than someone who is just going into an archive nearby. In an archaeological project, which are normally very interdisciplinary projects, you may have the need to do DNA analysis of bones. You need to travel if you work in the Americas. And this will cost far more as if you would work as a prehistorian in the middle of Germany. So, but it has to address, the needs and the consumables or the money you ask for in a convincible way. And this will be discussed in the written proposals by the reviewers who write the review, and then again in the review board, seeing is there a justification for the money you ask for. And sometimes it comes that they say, well, he won't need 2 doctoral students, 1 will be enough, or he won't need $20,000 for travel, 10 are enough, yeah? So there might be cuts. But all types of things can be applied for. It has to just be justified and explained.
I'd like to ask a question which ties together a number of issues people have discussed, and it's going back to the support of graduate students once again. Do you have any high-level research done on the number of graduate students you need to see, or you want to see, or the government would like to see in individual areas of knowledge, both within the university and perhaps outside of the university? And does the allocation of these graduate programs take those things into consideration?
Well, this wasn't or isn't done by us, to define a certain number of percentage of graduate students in different fields. This is something which must be done on the individual level even. I can't then say or restrict graduate students in that field to that number or that number. And what we of course see, as I've said previously also, we see a problem of probably too many doctoral students in certain fields coming out of universities without having a chance of proper employment. But now how to reduce it, yeah? We want to have the excellent ones. For the excellent ones, then we offer further possibilities with specific programs also of excellency to further advance into science. But that's a decision which can't be, forced or taken by us to say we only want to have that kind of that number of students and that number of students. The programs are restricted and they're very competitive. But for example, in ancient studies, we have a specific program, it's called Heisenberg Scholarship, which should enable excellent students who have already finished their postdoctoral education and who look or who have to wait for a free position. We are offering them funding of up to 4 years. And in ancient studies, I think 95% of the applicants have succeeded in then receiving a permanent position. But it's a very competitive program also.
Is this an area that any of the other agencies address?
Yes, it's something I think about quite a lot actually, and because your question is a very good one. The supply of funded places is never sufficient to meet the demand from talented people. Okay, that's just true. So people are turned away. But your slightly different question is, what is the optimal number you need to fund is actually a political political question to do with the release of government money for that kind of thing. As it happens, there is evidence in the UK that the government is thinking there aren't enough. They're thinking of different ways of releasing additional postgraduate
Well, even in the
money.
humanities?
Yeah.
That's very interesting, yeah.
I guess,
No, especially in the humanities.
Yeah. I guess for
That
us.
I think just went out. Yeah, go ahead.
So, but I guess it depends on whether you're talking about the number of spots that are available and the number of spots that we would support or fund. I mean, in our agencies in Canada, we fund a miserable proportion. I think we fund 10% of our postdoc applicants, probably on the graduate PhD master's side, probably something around the same. And then when this is the dilemma is this, people say, well, you should fund more. Well, okay, if you want me to fund more, then I have to take money out of research programs to do that. If I could, and usually I can't. And then I said on the end, and then I usually say on the other hand, we're funding a lot of students through our research. So what the optimal is, I don't know. In Canada, we ask a lot, you know, do we have enough PhDs? In fact, I'm going to a conference next week where we're going to be discussing, you know, do we have the optimal number of PhDs and what does that mean in any discipline? Canada has the highest rate in the OECD for post-secondary education enrollment, the highest rate, but among the lowest for PhDs. Is that hurting us? You know, is it helping us? Far lower than the U.S. And then by discipline, that's another story. And then that leaves you in the humanities in particular, a discussion that we've been having internally, and I'm just relating the nature of these, not the solutions, but where people are saying, well, humanities PhDs are having trouble finding jobs, there's no jobs in the academy, so should departments therefore reduce the size of their PhD programs in order to right size for the numbers of students that could be employed, or should they keep or expand their PhDs on the assumption that they can be now trained to do different things? And this has become part of a big discussion as well with those two tendencies at play.
We have time for one more question.
One of the things that is talked about, can you hear me?
Yes.
One of the things that's talked about a lot among... Thanks. One of the things that's talked about a lot amongst academics is the increasing division between the fully appointed staff and adjunct or temporary positions or whatever it might be. One of the nice ideas of funding people to be able to do their research, take off time from administration and so forth, also has as a sort of consequence the fact that certain people's track records accelerate, and track record becomes the basis of further grants. And what happens, at least what I experienced in Australia, and I think what's happening elsewhere as well, is that you sort of get a sort of upper class of researchers and a division within the academy between researching faculty and teaching faculty, which is further divided between fully appointed teaching faculty and hanging on teaching faculty. And I'm just wondering how that, which I think is, if that's happening across the board, and if you see the implications of that for cultivating a sort of elite research class at the cost, what cost that might have for research institutions and teaching in the humanities.
I'd like to take that.
I mean, that's a massive question to close the session, but an extremely good one. It worries me a lot, this, actually. There is significant evidence in the UK, to go no further, of continuing concentration of funding in smaller numbers of institutions. And I think that could end up in a situation which is actually detrimental, because it induces complacency, apart from anything else. And I do worry a bit about these people who are caught in no person's land between different career trajectories. Should they become accomplished teachers? Should they push on research? Should they, you know, all that kind of thing. And I think that is really quite, and there's very little guidance offered to people. So one thing I do think universities have got to get much better at is mentoring people who are inside the system. I think we are very poor at doing that, at least in the UK.
Thank you very much.